Hey everyone, welcome to No More, a podcast that envisions life after trauma. We are having the tough discussions and talking about what those next steps look like moving forward as we step outside of our trauma. What does the world look like when it starts healing and what can grow there? My name is Mireya, I am the creator and host, and today's episode is very near and dear to my heart. It is a subject that I hear a lot about in the media, and it's one that I've personally grown up with: autism. I am the sibling to a brother who is on the spectrum. And as much as this is something that has been very present and interwoven into the fabric of my entire life, it is also a very heated discussion, especially in the United States. And nobody knows where autism comes from. But I think one of the important factors that we need to pay attention to is it's not just a discussion point. These narratives impact vulnerable, real individuals. And so much of the time, that blame is being pointed at parents. Parents are already navigating the uncertainty of a child with autism, and that's also dependent on where along the spectrum they are diagnosed. There is a lack of representation and resources for more severe forms of autism. When a child comes into this world, there are systems and structures that are put in place to help them grow and develop along the way. The same cannot be said for autistic children. So you're talking about parents who are facing uncertainties and unknowns in a world that not only lacks the societal structures and resources to help their children reach their fullest potential, but also ostracizes, stigmatizes, and isolates their children. Parents are literally doing the absolute best that they can with what they have. Not to mention that the resources that are somewhat available are very costly and expensive. The last thing that parents of an autistic child need is a social stigma being imposed on them out of ignorance. So I decided to invite one of my best friends, Callie Boyette, a mother of 3 and a parent to a severely autistic level 3 child, Liam. Callie has very kindly set aside time to paint a very detailed picture of what the day-to-day realities of raising a severely autistic child look like. The cumulative traumas that have added up to her PTSD, the impact that it has on her family and friends, the stigma that she navigates, and the exhaustion that she faces as a devoted, caring, loving, and compassionate mother so that her child, Liam, can thrive in this world. Callie Boyette, welcome to No More.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
You and I have known each other for the better part of our lives. I've technically known you since we were 5 years old, but we've been best friends since 12. And one of the things I really love about having a long-term friendship to grow old with is you explore so many different dimensions and aspects of each other. And one of the privileges of being your friends is getting to know you as a mother. I am very privileged to say that I am also the godmother of your eldest of 3. And another aspect of motherhood for you that I've seen you grow through and evolve through an experience is becoming a parent of an autistic child and someone who is also very severely on the extreme end of autism. I'm curious to understand what that journey has looked like. But before we dive into that, I'd love to know how you understood autism before you became a parent of an autistic child.
Oh, that's a great question. I really didn't know anything about autism before Liam was born. I thought I knew what autism was. I had a close friend with a brother with autism that I was around, and I saw depictions on TV of what autistic children and adults were like. So I thought that I knew, but I had an incomplete perspective of what autism actually was.
So, what was that initial introduction to understanding and discovering that your child was autistic? What did that look like for you?
That was a lot. I wouldn't have gotten Liam diagnosed so early, but I went to Texas to visit my sister with my 3 kids, and pretty quickly she recognized some behaviors in Liam. She's a special education teacher, so she works a lot with autistic children. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. And we were in the car, and she had this conversation with me that was one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. And she just told me her observations, and that she suggested that maybe we get him diagnosed or to go see someone, and that was a really tough conversation. And we went to an indoor playground afterwards, and I was just watching him, and I noticed some things that I had always noticed, but I didn't really put the pieces together. And some of the things that I observed was that he wasn't playing with any other children. He kept running off, which is called elopement. I've learned that now. And he was stimming, which means he makes noises with his mouth. He likes the word E a lot, and that can kind of help calm him. And he was also putting a lot of things in his mouth. And if you don't know what autism is, then when you see those, you're like, oh, that's just, kids being kids. Like, I was a mom. I had only had one other kid before that. And I didn't really know that that was a behavior that could mean it was autism. And I remember texting my husband on the way home and telling him, I think Liam has autism, which in hindsight is probably not the best way to tell my husband, but I was kind of in a different world there. But the second I saw him, we looked at each other, we gave each other a huge hug, and we started crying. And it was really tough. And then it took another 6 months for us to be able to get him diagnosed, which was a really long time. You're in limbo when you're waiting for that diagnosis. And it's really hard because we wanted to learn about autism, but we didn't know for sure that it was autism. It could have been sensory processing disorder or something like that. So I was afraid to dive too far into that. So that was a really tough part. And then he was diagnosed, and they basically just gave us a piece of paper, and it said, your child is level 3. And I didn't really understand what that meant. I've come later to see the differences between level 1 and level 3, but in that moment, it wasn't very clear what level 3 meant. At that time, I thought that autism was all one thing. I didn't realize that there was such a huge difference between level 1 and level 3, which I'll talk about later, but that was not something that I really understood at the time. Leaving that room after that diagnosis, it was kind of like when you leave the hospital with a baby for the first time and you're like, okay, now I'm left to figure it out. Okay, good luck. That's kind of how it was when we left the room after he was diagnosed. It was just very overwhelming and isolating.
So you basically received a diagnosis. There was no social worker on site who could help you walk through the process of what that looked like or direct you towards resources.
Yeah, it's like they had a few like links of like, I think it had like Autism Tennessee on there, and they called them resources, which, yes, I mean, the website itself does have information, but to me, links and a few words, that does not encompass all that autism comes with. Like, I think that having someone that I could have like had regular meetings with for the first month to talk about, what autism actually was, and this is some of the experiences that you might have or what to look for next would have been helpful. I think that was the hardest part, is just getting the piece of paper. And it's like all this build up to getting diagnosed. And then it's like, okay, bye, see you later. Here's a piece of paper with some information. And, you can read information. It doesn't mean that you really digest it and understand how those implications will change your life. Yeah, that was tough.
It's interesting that you bring in the comparison of, oh, you've just had a baby when you're in the hospital, and now you have to figure it out, except that there are so many resources and books and communities that are built around what it means to parent. And you have far more many people to relate to as a parent because it's having a child, as opposed to there is a lack of resources and supporting community around autism. And you just said that there is a difference between the levels, right? We hear the autistic spectrum, but what that really looks like is not all encompassing. It's actually incredibly different. It's a difference of how your brain has developed and how it will continue to develop and wire. What were the differences that you understood between level 1 and level 3 as Liam was getting older and you had now had the diagnosis?
For me, our journey of figuring out the differences between level 1 and level 3 was another kind of trauma in itself. First was the initial diagnosis. And not to say that, I love my child and he has made me such a great parent, but it is a trauma to find out that your child has autism, because everything changes. Like, it is so scary, and you don't know what that means for them. And that's a really scary situation to be in. So there's a big difference between level 1 and level 3 autism. Level 1 autism is considered low support needs, and level 3 is considered high support needs. And I love using the word needs here. So high needs and low needs to me is a lot better than using the word function, high functioning and low functioning, because I think it's really important how we talk about autism, and it can be very hurtful to hear the function part. I had a nurse talk to me about her high functioning autistic child and how that really served her well. And I'm like sitting here like wanting to cry inside because my son would be considered low function, which is really hurtful. So I think needs, so using the words needs, high needs, low needs, that's really important. It really started to click the difference between level 1 and level 3 when I joined an autistic support group for parents. This is like a year into our journey. I had found a mom support group and I had been looking for a long time. So I was really excited. It was great at first. The women were so lovely and they were bringing up autistic challenges and it was great. But then things started to change. And this part is hard for me to put into words. It's hard for me to describe the feeling that I was having. It was kind of like being in a slow-mo movie where like the climax is happening and the main character has this huge realization. And it was like this huge, big moment for me because my sister, when Liam was first diagnosed, she was like, it's okay. This isn't like, it's not like it used to be, there are CEOs that have autism, there are people that go on to have great success. So in my mind, that's what I was thinking about before. But as I was sitting there at this support group, these women were talking about their kids' struggles and they were talking about awkward social situations, that their daughter was having a hard time finding a boyfriend, that it was hard for them to maintain eye contact. Meanwhile, I was sitting there and my struggles were getting Liam to be potty trained. It was that he is non-speaking and doesn't communicate with us and can't tell us when he's sick or he's hurting or if he needs a glass of water. Also life and death situations. So we're dealing with survival and they're dealing with social situations. And it like really clicked that there was a huge difference. And that was another traumatization. And I felt really isolated again. And I went home very confused and angry and I had a lot of questions.
It's an interesting way to actually paint the picture of what that spectrum looks like. There's social survival and then there's survival itself. And I think, especially in a modern world, we think of level 1 autism as, oh, you're not socializing in the way that you would see other people socializing who don't have autism. You're grappling with an entirely different diagnosis, essentially.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. And I realized that they wanted to have it the spectrum, and then they want it's the words have changed over the years on how they describe autism. That's because they're understanding more and they want to make sure that the way that they're wording things includes everybody. And like, but I think that's such a hard thing to put those labels and words into something. And I think that's hard. I think it was hard for me as a parent with a level 3 autistic child because I didn't understand how severe it was going to be. When I realized how intense, how severe my son's autism was, how many needs he was going to have, like I said, that was another trauma in itself. And there's a lot less level 3 than level 1. So that was a really tough situation for sure.
I remember last year when I was shadowing in a hospital. So you're talking about healthcare professionals, and I was in a conversation with two of the senior doctors and one of the nurses and a fellow as well. And we were discussing what that spectrum looks like. And you said it so well of people want to be inclusive because kids who are on the spectrum have been excluded from the conversation or have been dehumanized. And so there is this need and this want to be inclusive of everybody and recognize neurodivergence. But it's also being able to speak specifically to the person and, as you said, their needs, because level 1, level 2, and level 3 are not the same and they have different needs to help them evolve and grow. And recognizing that within that larger inclusivity is giving people the opportunity to develop and to grow and evolve and meet those needs.
Yes, I agree completely. Because, the media shows level 1 autism as you can succeed, you can be a CEO, it's not to say that my child, I don't want to put limits on Liam. I want to always push him to be the best version of himself, just like I would with, any of my kids. But there's just not representation for level 3 in the media. You see level 1, you see like the show Atypical on Netflix, which is a lovely show. I really liked that show. But that was just another example of showing level one, which is fine. I think anytime that autism is in the conversation is so important. And I think it's so important for level one autistic people to see themselves represented. So I'm definitely like, I think that that's wonderful. But I never see level three. And that can feel very isolating, and it can cause people to think that autism is just one thing. And they see, this kid succeeding, and like maybe he's socially awkward, but he's succeeding and he's super smart. And level one tends to be very high IQ. And then people think they know what autism is, and they don't realize how much we struggle in our daily life. And that's another isolating situation for us that's really difficult, because I want to see representation for my son and my family too.
And that matters because that's what's going to normalize the conversation. I hold a very big belief, and as someone who is now in the podcasting world, that media, because it has such a far and extensive and global reach, has a greater capacity to normalize and naturalize the conversation. As you began understanding what level three looks like, especially after all of these years, what have you noticed within the autistic community? I remember you telling me that there is a stigma. I know that you felt alone or isolated when you were going to these support groups, but I also remember you talking about how there is turmoil within the autistic community itself, as much as there is the need for inclusivity and representation. What has that looked like for you?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting topic for me. There is a clash in the autistic community about representation, especially about the differences between level one and level three autism. Level one autism, people are usually able to speak for themselves. So they often advocate for acceptance and accessibility and the recognition that autism is a natural form of neurodiversity, that it's not something to be cured. And since they have their own voice, they emphasize their experience and them advocating for themselves. And this is just my understanding. And level three autistic people, they're typically nonverbal and they're not speaking for themselves. So it's the parents, me, who are their voices, and we have to speak up for them. And our focus is on services and therapies and safety and long-term care. And autistic level one people may feel that parents are speaking over them or framing autism in terms of deficits or burdens. But parents of high needs children, we feel that we're misunderstood and that our realities, our daily struggles are not being seen or represented. And that's something that's really important for us. And we want to do our kids justice. So I think both sides are afraid that their reality is being erased.
So, going back to that lack of representation, one of the reasons why, I mean, you're one of my best friends, but you are someone who really advocates for your family and shows up and is there every step of the way. What does being a parent with a severely autistic child look like?
Ooh, yeah, that is a big one. Life with a level three autistic child is a lot of life and death situations. It's destruction of your home. It's being constantly paranoid and worried. It's also a lot of love. It's a lot also me being the best version of myself. I've had to really learn patience, and he has truly made me the best parent I could possibly be. And he has shown me so much love and understanding. And I don't want it to sound like it's all bad, because it's definitely not all bad. It's all hard, but it's also very beautiful. And his love is so pure. He's not lying to my face. He's not trying to sneak around. He is truthful and he is real. And when he kisses you on the cheek, you know that it's real and for no other alternative. That pure love is a huge blessing for me. And I love that little boy so much. That being said, some of the intense stuff we deal with is, I think, right around the time Liam was diagnosed, we had a party at our house. I think it was like a birthday party, something like that. And we were all in the backyard. And mind you, our backyard doesn't have a fence. And all of a sudden, this couple comes around the corner and Liam is with them, and they look very pissed off. And they were like, "We just found your child in the street. We almost hit him with the car. Like, what is he doing? You are so irresponsible." And I just like dropped. When I have someone come at me like that, I tend to like just freeze and I don't know how to react. And luckily, our very sweet friends stood up for us. And I get that those people, from their perspective, this little boy was in the street. Yeah, that's scary. But for the parent, like they don't know our situation. And we were still learning about autism. And it wasn't like we weren't watching him. Whenever we're in the backyard, we're always constantly watching him. And sometimes he would run off, but we would, chase after him. But we had all those eyes on him, like all of our friends there. And it took an instant for him to run off. And it felt really scary and embarrassing and horrible. What if something worse had happened to him? And that was the first real life and death situation that we experienced. The next one that was really big was we had just moved into the house we live in now. We hadn't gotten a chance to protect our house. We've got special door locks on all of our doors. We have latches on a lot of our drawers. We have lots of precautions in place. We've got sound beepers on all the doors, so if it opens, it makes an alarm. But we hadn't done that yet because we had just moved into our house and we had Trevor's family in town. After about 5-10 minutes, we realized that Liam wasn't in the house. Like we couldn't find him. We were like, "Where's Liam?" So we were like looking all over the place. We were looking in the backyard. We found Liam in our car, and it was in the middle of summer, and he was drenched in sweat and completely red like a tomato. I honestly don't know how much longer he could have survived in that car. That was absolutely horrible. Finding him in that car and the guilt and shame that I felt that I didn't realize my child was gone sooner, and that if he had gone another 10 minutes, that I don't know if he would have survived that. Words don't really do it justice here when I say scary. Those kind of situations come up a lot. And the fear that my child is going to die is a constant for me. And that is a hard, hard place to live in. He also does other things, like he will poop and get his poop and smear it on the walls. And I don't think it's him trying to be destructive. I think it's like he's like, "Oh my God, I pooped." And like he touches his butt and then he has poop on his hand. So then he smears it because he doesn't want it on his hand. But then he'll get it on toys or our playroom. One time he got it all on in our ball pit and we had to go and take it in the bathtub and wash each ball one by one and disinfect it. He also pees on the carpet. It's gotten better, but he will still take off his diaper and pee when he has to pee, or he will be mad at us. And his way of communicating with us is to be like, "Hey, I'm just going to go pee on the carpet because I want that candy bar and you're not giving it to me." Because that's the way he can communicate. Even though we do our best effort to clean everything and we get our carpets regularly cleaned, it still smells like pee a lot. And that is a really tough thing in our house. It's a big struggle. Potty training is really difficult, and we're getting there. He's finally peeing on the toilet when we take him in, but we have to do it and sit there with him for up to 30 minutes sometimes, and it's a big constant struggle.
And for people who don't understand, how old is Liam at this point?
Liam is 6 years old and he's about to turn 7. So I'm still changing his diaper. Potty training has been a very long experience. Like we've been working on this with him for 2 years and we're finally getting him to pee in the toilet. But that is when we take him to there. He's not doing it on his own. So it will continue to be a long struggle. But you know what? We will get there. We will get there. Because if we don't work on this now, then he'll be 12 or 13 years old and he will still be doing the same thing. He'll still be taking off his clothes, and then we can't, it's fine as like a 6-year-old, but when you're 13, you can't be having a 13-year-old get naked around, my daughter's like 6-year-old friends. At that point she'll be like 6. So these are behaviors we really have to work on now. Another one, a life and death situation, was that Liam was, we were at home and we couldn't find him, and we were like, "Okay, we got to find Liam. We got to find Liam." And I heard him, but I couldn't find him. I looked in the laundry room, I looked in the pantry, and then I looked at the fridge and I was like, "Okay, there's no way he's in the fridge." But you know what? That's just the life we live in. Let's just, go open the fridge. I opened the fridge and he was on the top shelf in the fridge. That was kind of like the car situation where I didn't have the heart to look up how long someone can live in a fridge, but that gave me a lot of trauma because ever since then, especially that first month or two after it happened, I kept picturing myself opening the fridge and finding my son dead in the fridge. And that is not an image that you want to have happen every time you go to open your fridge. That was really tough. I'm still kind of dealing with that trauma. And we have updated our fridge locks. Like every time something like that happens, I go into plan mode. What can we do? How do we, make this more safe? And each time we try to work on that behavior and then make things safer. He also does things like destruction of property. He had gotten into our fridge another time. I think this time we had forgotten to put the lock on. And he had gotten out of his room somehow. I don't know how I guess he learned how to take off the lock on the door or open it differently. And he went downstairs, got in our fridge, got fruit juice, eggs. I mean, literally the entire contents of our fridge, and poured it all over our living room. It ruined our couches. There was red everywhere. It looked like a murder scene. It ruined our rug, our stairs. I mean, it was everywhere. There was red everywhere. It was like someone got a paint can and just like poured it, and then there was like mashed fruit and old milk, just it was really bad. And it took a long time to clean up, and it did a lot of damage. And we have to put a lot of special locks and security on our house. And the long-term goal is to not need that. That's what ABA talks about, is like the ideal reality is not having to have that stuff, and to teach him that the behaviors of not doing that. But right now, if we don't, it's his life on the line. So we have to have all those safety features in place. And this is at our own home, which is why it's hard to go outside of the home. Yeah.
For our listeners who don't know what ABA is, and we're going to get a little bit into that further down in the conversation, but can you just tell us what ABA is?
ABA therapy is applied behavior analysis, and it is a type of therapy that is the most effective therapy for autistic individuals.
Going back to the reference of bringing home a newborn and you become a parent, and you're like, okay, now what do I do? Your first life and death experience with Liam, with this neighboring couple. I mean, when you have a kid, there are so many ways in which your child can escape you even for a moment. And at that point, you're having two kids, you've moved into a new community in a new state. I mean, everything that you just said is about a child who you can't, and at this point in his life, it's very difficult to teach him this translates to death or harm. This is bad. And so you have a child who's not registering this information, whereas a child who's not autistic would be able to understand this and not continue these behavioral patterns. Whereas with Liam, it's a bit different. So everybody has a different way of parenting. For parents who kind of face like, oh, I screwed up or I didn't do this right, it's hard because it's even more difficult to teach a child who is severely autistic to recognize you're putting yourself in harm's way. And you're also talking about, on top of the life and death situations, the finances that you have to expend to outfit your house, to be a safe home, to be a better parent, to be more visually aware of him, and a better parent to a child who's autistic. And then if something slips, there's now the added cost and even greater cost of, we have to fix our living room, we have to
Yeah.
care for our living
Yeah.
situation. As you said, this is all in the home. This is within your unified safe space that you have control over.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It's like having a newborn and that doesn't grow up. We've worked a lot. ABA therapy has really been the best thing for us that's helped, and we've seen a lot of growth, but it truly is like having a newborn where you have to watch them constantly. Like it is 24/7 care. And that being on guard is exhausting, and it's scary, and the future is scary with that. And it's a lot of emotions. And I'm thankful to be in the situation that we are, because I saw something in the news, a few months ago, where there was a single parent, a dad, who was in jail because his autistic child had gotten out. Like I think they were like sleeping in the garage, and it wasn't a situation of like, to me, that sounded like neglect. It sounded like a dad doing the absolute best he could to take care of his son with a lot of needs. And that somehow he got out and he was like found on the highway running like naked. And that's absolutely a situation that could have happened to me, by the way, and it's not from a lack of supervision. Those things just happen sometimes. And then this man was put into jail, and it broke my heart. And this was, I think it happened in another Tennessee state. And I so wanted to get in the car and just like drive to that guy and like pay his bail. Like I felt so bad that this was happening to him. And I know that they stereotyped him, and they were like, oh, he's sleeping in the garage. Oh, and I think this man didn't have a lot of money. And I'm sitting here, and from my perspective, I'm like, where's the mom? There's a single parent and a dad. He's doing the best he can to take care of his child, but then now he's like in jail for it on top of everything else. And that just really broke my heart. All I know is that I am extremely lucky. I live in a great area and have the means to help my son, and not everyone has that experience. And if I'm struggling this much, I can't even imagine how difficult it is for everyone else. That is something that I think about sometimes late at night, and then it really breaks my heart.
And there's a stigma painted against parents with autistic children because, as you said, it was viewed as neglect when you have this child who puts themselves unknowingly in life and death situations, doesn't understand the harm that they're causing, and it's not a form of neglect. And this is where a lot of that stigma and that shame comes in, where the reality is that a parent is doing everything they can. If having a child itself is exhausting. Imagine having a child that you have to look after 24/7 because you don't know what their next move is going to be. And as you said, Liam's love is very pure. He is honest and authentic and a real child. So everything that he's doing is not out of any bad intention other than he's just doing it and he's exploring and experiencing the world around him. But you have to be on high alert 24/7. Parents are being painted in a very negative light when the reality is again, there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of community and support. And because that stigma has become the overarching narrative, people outside of their intimate community or their family ostracize or exclude them or further that stigmatization. And so it becomes even more isolating and harder.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that one. We've definitely gotten looks from people, we've gotten judgment, and that's really hard because we're just trying to survive and we're doing the best we can. And people just don't understand what our life is like and our daily struggles. And that judgment is so hard. I mean, you already get that as a parent because that's just the way the world works. But then, you know, that's even more with an autistic child. And that's why home is our safe space. That's it. And that's even, I mean, home is still dangerous things happen, clearly, but it's still a safer space than going outside of the home where it's an environment we can't control, because that is a different set of worries. We have to put Liam in a stroller, and I truly don't know what we're going to do as he gets older. We like to put him in a stroller if we're going to something like a festival or something where there's lots of walking, because then he can't run away. Because if we don't put him in a stroller or are physically holding his arm the entire time, he will run away. And I don't mean like he'll run away and come back. I mean, he will run away. He could run into the parking lot and get hit by a car. We cannot let him go. And I've even considered getting one of those like leash things to attach him to. And I remember seeing parents that had that, and I was like, oh my God, that is ridiculous. You were an anxious parent. Like, I remember the judgment that I had for those parents. And I now, in hindsight, I feel horrible about those judgments, because here I am, like, having that consideration to keep my child safe. Just like when you have a kid, the judgments you make before you have children about parents, it's the same thing that the judgments you make before you have an autistic child. I mean, Liam does not have that fear. To put it into perspective, he's like an Olympic sprinter. He is so fast that if you take your eye off of him for even a second, he is gone and he is far away. And you have to anticipate where he will go next. If you don't know him pretty well, then it's really hard to gauge that. Having anyone else watch him can be very difficult because they don't know him like we do. We were at a McDonald's and I took him, we love to go to the play place and play. And that is usually, great because it's enclosed. This one time he got completely naked and then he pooped in the slide. So then I had to like hold him, get his clothes on before anyone saw, get up in the slide, get the poop, get him all together, throw that away, do all of this, like get my sanitizing wipes and like all of this, and then leave. And I'm just like anytime we go out, those things can happen. And not to say that that happens every time, but that is a absolute possible reality that happens frequently. And going to places like indoor play places can be very stressful because he gets overstimulated by the crowds and the noise. He loves water. So if there's like a waterscape, they had this like whole thing, and he kept getting into the water thing, and you're not supposed to do that. And he would not stop. And it was to the point then he started screaming as we were pulling him away. And then everyone's looking at us. And mind you, we still have our two other children that are like asking us for things and wanting to go here and there, and Liam's screaming and we're looking at each other, and then we start fighting, and it was just, we were like, we've got to leave. Everything is like very difficult. Doing any one thing is very difficult. Travel is difficult. Or like we went to my grandmother's ranch. We don't have the safety locks for her doors, and it's a different type of door. And when we were getting ready for her funeral, Liam took off his clothes, opened the door, and ran out. And he ran to this barbed wire fence. And thankfully, we realized he was gone and found him. But, Liam, some kids might run off, but then they have the common sense to come home or stay in the same location or find another mommy to help them. But Liam, he's nonverbal. He doesn't speak. So he can't tell grown-ups who he is, where he needs to be, what he needs. If he's in pain, we're struggling to find a tracker for him because he takes off all of his clothes. He takes his shoes off, his socks off, and he doesn't like a bracelet, stuff like that. So I'm trying to come up with something where I can have a tracker on him, because inevitably something like that is going to happen. I mean, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, I want to have a backup. So there's just a million and one things like that we have to think through every single thing so carefully, because it's his life on the line.
And these are in high stress life and death situations that you have to be aware of every minute nuance of the situation.
And it is a full-time job. It's why I haven't gone back to work. There's just no way that I could do that. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to have a husband that has a salary that can cover both of us, because I truly don't know how I would manage having a full-time job and managing everything else that I do.
And what is everything else that you do?
Besides, let's see, cooking, cleaning, taking care of my kids. I'm also the VP of membership for my mom's group, which is a nonprofit. I'm the magic maker. I plan all the birthdays. I plan all the vacations. I plan all the special events. I keep up with all the school stuff. I get all the emails from school, which let me tell you are a lot. I also manage the communication with all of Liam's teachers. He has frequent IEP meetings that come with lots of paperwork. We get money from the state to help pay for some of Liam's needs. I'm very, very thankful for that, but there is a lot of paperwork that comes with that. So I'm constantly filing insurance claims and filling out paperwork. I'm driving a lot for his ADA therapy. Before he started kindergarten, just me, I was driving an hour and a half in the middle of the day, and then my husband would drive an hour or two in the morning as well. I am shuffling my kids to sports and a million other hidden tasks that you don't see and that I can't think of off the top of my head. It's a lot.
So on top of being a mother of 3 children, you are also the parent of a severely autistic child. With that comes so much more responsibility. And as you said, thankfully, you have your wonderful husband, Trevor, who can support the both of you. And Trevor also works from home. So this is a constant team effort. The enormous amount of responsibility that you have as parents, as well as the constant heightened awareness and alert that you are on. How has this affected your family life with your 2 other children?
This has affected my kids and my husband and I a lot. My husband and I, we go through periods of depression and exhaustion, and sometimes they're on at different times, sometimes they're both at the same time. But that exhaustion, it's never ending. It's forever, which is very heavy. The divorce rates for parents of children with autism is very high. I'm very proud of the relationship that I have with my husband. We are a very good team, and I don't know what I would do without him or how I could do all of this with anyone else. It is very, very hard. It's hard on our marriage. We don't get vacations together very often. They're hard because we have to make sure the environment is safe for Liam. Things like the doors and locks, fridges. I mean, supervision has to be managed all the time. And I don't know how he would do on a long flight. So Europe, yeah, that's kind of out of the question, which is sad. And I miss travel a lot. So yeah, Trevor and I don't get to take a lot of trips together. And when we do, it's only a few nights because my mom is the only one that can handle watching Liam. And she's almost 70. So it's a lot. Like she can't handle more than, and we've got 2 other kids. That's a lot for her. And it's hard when you see friends going on like week-long anniversary trips and having this great time, which don't be wrong, I'm so like, that always makes me really happy for them. But then it makes me sad for me because I don't get to do that. And it's not just the vacations, but it's also important life events. Like, let's see, a few years ago, I had 3 cousins get married. I went to all of those weddings by myself. My husband and I are going to these huge life events and we're doing it without each other. And that is really hard to not have your partner in these big, precious moments. I really wish that I could have had him there for those moments. My uncle passed away, and that would have been time that Trevor could have been there to be around him. He didn't get that. That makes me really sad. So it's hard to move through life missing all of these important moments and having to live this separate life. And then same with date nights. Like we rarely get date nights, and that's hard on your marriage. Like everyone needs date nights, and we do the best we can, but it's still hard on a marriage when you don't get time to connect and have those moments to remind yourself that it's you two. We're not mom and dad, but we're Callie and Trevor. But I'm really proud of how we've navigated that and how we continue to navigate that situation.
It's going to take a moment to sit with that because it's hard to hear as your friend. And,
Yeah.
I remember when you and Trevor first started going out and being there as a bridesmaid at your wedding. And you guys are the couple that I look to as a really solid foundational relationship. So hearing how this has transformed, I mean, we're talking about your marriage right now. And we're not even talking yet about the family dynamics with the siblings, even though we've, slightly touched on the experience at the water park, but how this does affect marriages.
It definitely affects marriages in a profound way. And even with a relationship like Trevor and I's, it does make me sad because we are missing a lot. So there's this loss, not only the loss of like the perspective, the vision you had of your child and the relationship you were going to have with him. Me having conversations with Liam about, his first day of school, the girl or boy that he likes, or his hopes and dreams, like that relationship, it's not the same. And we mourned that loss, but we're also mourning the loss of the vision we had for our marriage and for our other kids, and the ability to travel, because we both like to travel a lot, and the ability to have the freedom to do things, to go to events, go out as a family. And I'm not talking just about like the big stuff, the travel, big events. I'm talking about small things like taking all three of our kids to the park to play soccer. We can't do that. I mean, we can, but someone's going to always have to be holding Liam for safety or have him in the stroller, which is fine, but it's not the same. It's not as easy. Those easy things that parents can just go and take their kids to do stuff, like it's not like that for us. So everything is a constant struggle, knowing that the next 18 plus years and the future, I don't even know beyond that, that's not going to change. That is definitely a heavy thing to sit with and navigate. And we still have to mourn that loss, that version of our marriage that we thought we would have. That's something that is a struggle a lot for us to. I'm still processing that loss, and struggling to come to terms with that's the way it is. I'm not sure if I'll ever quite be over that part of it. It does affect our other children. I do want to say I think that long term that it's going to create this empathy in both of our other children in the most beautiful way, and in a way that I am very thankful for. I think they will grow up to be very caring, kind, empathetic people, and I'm very thankful for that. But as children, it's hard for my son Nathan, my oldest. When he and Liam were younger, they would play together. They would jump on the trampoline and chase each other around. And as Nathan's gotten older and more mature, all he knows from Liam is a brother that isn't interested in him. It doesn't want to play with him. He doesn't say I love you. He doesn't even like try to steal Nathan's controller to play the video games and like go in his room and like take something that he really wanted, like a Pokemon card. Like I wish that they had that experience. Like even that the like annoying brother thing that, brothers will do, that doesn't happen. And we have to navigate how we talk to Nathan about that. And I get it from his perspective. Like he does it. It's really hard to put that into words in a way that a 8-year-old boy can understand. And then also, the amount of time we have to spend with Liam, then we're not putting that effort into our other kids. And then they see that. And it's hard as a kid to digest that and understand that. And I hope as they get older that their relationship will grow. And I think that it will. It's just tough right now. But Nathan is one of the kindest little boys. I'm incredibly proud of him, and especially lately, some of the things that friends have told me about him. I'm incredibly proud of that boy, and I completely understand his feelings towards the confusion. And when we had our daughter Chloe, that was a big shift. I think that kind of healed everyone and everyone's relationships, because Nathan had a sibling that now wants to play with him. But even more importantly, Liam and Chloe's relationship is really beautiful. And I hope it stays that way. It's Chloe meets Liam at his level. All she knows is that's my big bro and I love him. That's Liam. And I think that relationship has been very healing and beautiful to see. So having that dynamic, I think Chloe healed a lot of relationships between our kids and kind of brought them together.
And that's something that I am the sibling to someone on the spectrum. I will say I was a little bit of a menace as a child. Um, and my brother was equated to Christopher Robins, and I was just kind of like, and my brother was not as severely on the spectrum. However, I remember that I had a really difficult time grappling with that situation. And my mother is a single mother to a child on the spectrum, and so she had the both of us, and I had my own things growing up that weren't really dealt with until I was older. So there was, she was trying to really handle the two of us, and there were not as many resources or communities or digital spaces that spoke to the spectrum. However, I was someone who always thought I'm not getting enough attention. I learned to do things on my own. I became competitive because I didn't, I was seeking the attention that I wasn't finding. I had internalized my experiences as a child because I couldn't understand the situation. And I'm the younger sibling. However, I have a very close relationship with my brother now. And I know that's different because Liam is severely autistic, whereas my brother, he went to university, he holds a job, he drives, he has his own place. But I have this relationship now with my brother, and we're extremely close. And that's something I know that you and I have talked a lot about with Nathan, because he is my godson, what those conversations look like as he grows up, and understanding it's difficult as a child because you're not emotionally mature to really grapple and understand the situation. But as you said, it does make you a more empathetic person because you are growing with somebody, understanding it's not their fault. They are just the way that they are. And it's understanding they're all different kinds of people that make a world, and you are growing up with somebody who's different to you. But that is not a negative association, it's just a difference. And one of the things that I really love that you vocalize is talking about how Liam is non-speaking, and although there are dangers towards that where he can't express certain things like being in pain, or you can't communicate the dangers of certain situations, you also really honor and respect his space to communicate and express himself differently. And so your children are also growing up with these experiences. So as much as there is, I mean, it's difficult to hear because I know the life that you wanted to build growing up, this is, you have taken charge and built a whole new direction for you and your family, you and Trevor together, of what can we take away from this experience and how can we grow together.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, I always think you and Daniel's relationship has always been special. I remember being a kid. I remember whenever he would walk in the room, you instantly shifted your body to where he was and you were like, "Hi Daniel, hi Daniel." Your eyes were locked in and you made sure he heard you, that you were engaging him, that you brought him into the conversation or asked something that brought him in. And I've always seen that. I know that everyone's internal experience is different and I wasn't there for all the situations, but I always saw a clear love for him ever since we were kids. Always, always, always. And Daniel has always been such a sweet boy. And hey, who doesn't like a guy who just is truthful and says it like it is? There's something to be said about that. Oh my gosh.
Very honest.
Worry if they're lying. They're like, oh my gosh, that's like if you've got anxiety or like trust issues, there you go. That's perfect.
My brother, on top of being on the spectrum, is just was a shy person, and I'm
Yeah.
very extroverted. So our personalities are very different, but they complement each other super well. And like, this is one of the only one of very few people, a handful, that I look to, and I'm like, this is, the my grounding support. This is someone who's got me. So
Yeah.
which is why I think it's so important to highlight, like, somebody can be different from you. They can be neurodivergent in a way that you're not neurodivergent, because you and I are both very ADD,
Yes.
and we're managing very well right now.
Yes.
But it's, everybody brings something to the table.
I think it's actually really helped me to be neuro spicy, as I like to call it, as my ADHD help is, I mean, I guess they say it's like that's like the beginning of the spectrum. And I think it helps me have a unique perspective of understanding autism. Not, I'll never understand autism because I'm not autistic, but I can understand some of the complexities or the struggles with regulation or sensory needs, or just the fact that the world is not built for neurodivergent people and that there is nothing wrong with me. Our society is constructed to work for neurotypical people. And if it was built for, say, all ADHD people or all autistic people, then those things that you see that are social stigmas that we do wouldn't be considered social stigmas, because it's just, that's what everyone, that's the norm, that's just what we do, and people wouldn't take it personally. So I can definitely have that understanding in a different way because I experienced some of those things myself. So I think that's helpful for parenting a child on the spectrum. It also makes it difficult because then my own struggles can make it very hard for managing information. The processing and organizing of information I find very difficult. So that is a huge stressor for me to navigate all this. So I think that's a hard thing because I'm a stay-at-home mom and people have a view of what stay-at-home moms are and do. And especially with everything that I do and work with Liam, things take more time for me than they would with neurotypical people. So that can be heavy to deal with as well.
You're describing yourself as this stay-at-home mom, and we normally get this idea, this picture of the stay-at-home mom cooks, cleans, gets the children to school, and these are all still things that you do. But now you're also talking about caring for a child who is severely on the autistic spectrum, or on the more severe end of the autistic spectrum. The paperwork that's included, even though there is a certain amount of financial aid that you get, it also still adds more work on your plate in terms of person who has to advocate and organize. And you have to actively go out and find these resources and find this financial aid, even on top of the fact that your husband does work to the capacity where he can support you and your three children. But this is a much larger added cost. So, and then on top of that, you are caring for the community around you. You're talking about community engagement, keeping up with your peers, the school systems, play dates, making sure that you and Trevor are keeping up with your friends around you. So you're managing so much. You really are the center hub of your family that's organizing everybody's lives. As someone who has to be on high alert and oversee everything, every movement in your family, as you are reaching out and researching for support for your child, how have you find the resources, or rather the lack of resources, available to you for autistic childcare to be?
Resources for us have been scarce. Like I said, when he first was diagnosed and we got this piece of paper, it wasn't like we had this blueprint. And I know I keep making this comparison. It really is like when you have a kid for the first time and you don't know what you don't know, but you also have like these parenting books of saying all these different things. So there is a lot of resources out there, but it's still that feeling of like, you don't know what you don't know, and you're left to figure it out. It is hard to find resources and a clear path. There's both the lack of options and then too many options where there is no specific path to go. It's not like, okay, I have a level 1, level 3, here's the path you take. You kind of have to put the pieces together and see what works. The pressure that autistic parents, especially moms, feel is very, very heavy, and the weight of getting it right, because early intervention is key. And the stress of like finding the right early intervention and doing the right things, and that his future will be shaped by these decisions, is a huge toll. And it keeps me up at night. Yeah, that's definitely a struggle that's always going to be there. But the lack of resources, we have gotten better as a society at providing more resources and understanding autism more, but we're not even close to where we need to be. School is a big one. I wish that the school system was different. You know, we're fortunate to live in a fantastic district with some of the best schools, but they aren't set up for kids like Liam. There are great resources at the school, but it's not, those schools aren't structured for his brain and for autistic children. And there are some all autistic schools, but those schools are so expensive. And that's something that even with the money that we get from the state, that there is zero chance. Like I would have to get like, I'd have to win the lottery to be able to afford that. And we're still trying to figure out what environment Liam needs to thrive in. That has been a really difficult thing to figure out. He just started kindergarten and we're trying to figure out, is this the right school for him? Is this the right environment for him? Because
And you're seeing this parallel between the representation with that we spoke earlier about how level one kids on the spectrum, there's a lot of representation. There's a lot of discussion of here are all the possibilities and what is accessible, or here are the opportunities for them. But we, in parallel and seeing that with the lack of representation for level three, we're also seeing the lack of research and therefore lack of resources available to level three kids. And I know from our previous conversations, one of those is the schooling system. And that's a very big part of it because normally kids go to school, they have some sort of structure that can help them develop into a direction. I know that's something that you've had a bit of a time with and helping Liam and creating that structure. What does that look like for you guys?
we just started kindergarten with Liam, so we are exploring what that looks like in the school system. This is something my husband and I have been thinking about for a long time. We delayed kindergarten by a year so that he could go to ABA therapy because that piece was so important for him to make these connections before going into a school environment. And he had been in preschool before, but kindergarten is different. We're going to give it the year and see how things go because I want to give every effort to make this environment work for him. We're going to try a bunch of different things. My fear is that the school environment, even with so many accommodations, won't ultimately be the most beneficial for him. But I'm not exactly sure what environment that would be. So we're trying to figure that out, which is why we want to do our due diligence to work with the school and see how that goes. It's all just a very slow process and things are trial and error. I just hope that the structure that they have in the school system, which is an excellent school system, if that is going to be the best one for him. We'll see. We're going to work through that. And I think for a lot of level 1 autistic children, it is the right place because a lot of their struggles, and I don't want to speak to each kid is different, but one of the big things is the social thing. So I think being in a social environment is good for them because they get to practice that a lot. And I think that will help them a lot in adulthood because the social piece is so important and learning to navigate that is crucial. So I think that's really good. But for level 3, when we're learning things like potty training and basic communication, it scares me that he will get lost in the school system, even with the school bringing him a lot of services. You don't know what you don't know. We just kind of have to go with it and trust that we will figure it out, and we will. But the lack of childcare is really heavy. I remember watching this video that Colin Farrell did about his son who doesn't have autism, but he has something else that is somewhat similar. And he was saying that he struggled so much to find childcare and help. And this is someone who has millions. And I remember him saying, like, I can't imagine how hard this is going to be for everyone else. That's why he started a foundation to try to help with that. And I think, oh, he's just great. But that's kind of the struggle that I'm having is finding childcare because I don't trust anyone with Liam. It's hard to find someone who can watch him and keep him safe because the difference between level 1, level 3, people might say, oh, I am, a student who is studying this in school. I want to practice this. But I think a lot of people do think of autism as the level 1 autism, but then you come into an environment where a kid puts himself in a life and death situations, that's very different. So finding someone that they feel comfortable enough doing this and we feel comfortable enough letting them, that's very hard to find, especially in, a small suburb town in Nashville. Right now, the only person that I let watch him is my mom. And as she gets older, that's going to be less and less of an option. So that's something that's going to take a lot of work to build a network of resources for. And I wish that was more readily available. Even they have like parent nights out at a lot of places. It's like drop your kids off, go have fun, go see a movie, do whatever. But we don't have that option because they aren't going to watch our child. That's just not an option for us. And even places that do advocate for neurodivergence, they don't. I've seen them cater more towards it's like the level 1 autism. And even in that realm, I still feel like level 3 isn't really being represented. And that's tough as well. I feel like the lack of resources is very apparent in our lives.
I remember last month when you were talking about Liam coming into kindergarten and how that was a bit of a terrifying feeling for you guys, and you want it to work out. You want him to have the structure and be immersed with kids his own age and build some sort of connection because he has had a previous experience of, to put it gently, not being accepted within the school systems. And I know that's something that you guys have struggled with.
So not the school system, but private daycare. So I didn't realize that private daycares can kick children out for whatever reason that they deem is okay. Our experience was that we put him in daycare at the same place that we had my son, my other son. He wasn't there very long. He was there for a few months and they kicked him out because he's autistic. Now, of course, they framed it a little differently, but that experience was really traumatizing because we hadn't gotten him diagnosed for sure yet. We had a feeling that that was coming, but he hadn't been diagnosed. We were already going through this emotional roller coaster. Every day I would go pick Liam up, the teacher or director would pull me and essentially tell me how bad my child was, that he wouldn't listen, he was climbing, he was doing all these kids. It was clear that they thought that it was just like too much. At the time, we were getting services through the state, and we had a behavioral therapist that we were communicating with on Zoom calls that was fabulous. And she very sweetly offered to go to the school and help the teachers and help train them a little bit and show them some of the things that they could do. So she did that. The very next day, they called us in and kicked Liam out. They said they were willing, they wanted to work on it. They let this woman come into the school. She came and did this. And then the very next day, they kicked him out. So they weren't really trying to work with us. They were just biding their time until they could kick us out. The way they handled it, the way that they spoke about Liam, that he was just too much, they said that they didn't have the services that they needed to help him. And to some extent, I do understand that, but also, like, if I really truly felt that that's what they meant, it was more that they didn't want to deal with someone like Liam. And they made it very clear that his behavior was wrong. And I would go home crying in the car every single day because I was already dealing with all of this and all this uncertainty. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing my kid's a bad kid. So that was horrible. And again, that's why I'm thankful that I didn't have to go back to work, because what do parents do when their kids get kicked out and they have no childcare? Because it's hard to get into daycares. There's a long list, and it takes some schools, it can take up to a year to get into a daycare. So you're left with no childcare. How are you supposed to take care of, like, if you have a job you have to go to, how are you supposed to support yourself? Like, that is, I had no idea that that was an issue. And I'm not the only one that has had that experience at that school. There are several other people that have had the same experience. So it wasn't just me. And that was helpful to know that it wasn't just, in my head, because you start to think like, oh, is this me? Is this my issue? Is this like, what did I do? Like, but no, it is something that happens everywhere, even in a wonderful area with so many resources like we have where I live. But then he turned 3 and he was able to go into the school system, and then he's protected and they cannot kick him out. They have to provide resources. He gets an IEP and he's protected. And he went to a school that will always have a special place in my heart, because this part will make me cry. On the very first day of school, his teacher, Miss Caroline, who, oh, I love that woman so much, came up to me and said, "We are so happy to have Liam at our school, and we just love him so much. He's such a sweet little boy." And that broke me, after going through an experience where your child is bad and not doing the right things, and then to go into an environment where they're like, "We love him, he belongs here." That was so healing and needed, and I am so thankful for his teacher, the one that he got. I mean, they're all fabulous there, but that teacher was uniquely beautiful, and you believed that she loved every single one of those babies and was going to do her absolute best to provide them whatever she could. She was a rare human, and we still keep in contact because I love her so much. She's amazing.
What you're really describing, and you said it so perfectly, is all of a sudden you had this uncertainty. That's what really the lack of resources is when you're dealing with something so enormous and overwhelming. And it's also emotionally taxing. And you're talking about this in terms of also someone that you deeply love, your child. So when you don't have those resources provided to you, it's, well, then what comes next? And I think so much of the time, like, we take the resources that we have for granted. We don't necessarily, we're all super busy. Like, one of the really big parts that I've learned in this podcast is everybody is just trying to keep standing up straight on 2 feet and keep going. And so it's really being able to have empathy for each other and compassion for each other, and knowing that like we're all trying to do our best. But when you have something such as a child who has lack of representation, lack of research, lack of resources, it does create this greater uncertainty of what is their future. And then on top of that, as you said, they are associating your child as someone who is negative. They're taking, this little boy who is, as you said, he's just authentically himself, but they're associating him in a bad light because they don't understand what he's doing. And that sort of ignorance, that unknown, and that's another conversation I've had a lot here on No More, is ignorance breeds stigma, because when we don't understand something and it affects us in any sort of negative way or asks us to feel things that are heavy or emotionally overwhelming, we tend to ostracize it, we tend to stigmatize it, we impose a narrative onto it because we don't want to deal with it. And that was very clear in when you had this woman come into the school and they didn't even try. And that's one of the larger issues with all of this, is people have to be willing to try. You have to, especially with the rising rates of autism in children nowadays, we need to have more spaces that integrate children. And I think it is amazing that after this awful experience, you created a connection with someone that you still stay in touch with, who cherishes and sees your child for who he is, because they understand how his brain has developed, and they are able to look at him for who he is and not, well, why can't I manage this child? Well, that child doesn't communicate or understand things that way. You just have to go out of your way a little bit more. The opportunity is there. It is possible. And it helps parents like you.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I know I've talked on a lot of things where it almost sounds like this really negative view of autism, but that's not the way I feel. When I tend to talk about it, it does sound negative, but it's more that it's so hard. And I don't want it to sound like my child is beautiful and wonderful just the way he is. I'm not trying to change him. I'm trying to help him live in a world, live in this world, live in the world that we have constructed, and give him the resources to make sure that he's safe and that he can have some kind of life in this world. And as a caregiver, it is very, 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 very difficult to navigate that, as I've made that, clear. And it's very, very difficult for him. I mean, I can't even imagine what's going on in his brain and how scary and overstimulating, and how, like, I wonder, is he just thinking, like, is he in his brain and he's like, no one sees me, no one hears me, I'm invisible? I read a story about a kid that was autistic, and he thought he was talking out loud, but he wasn't. Like, he was saying words and he thought he was verbalizing them, but he wasn't, and it was just in his head, and he just thought people ignored him, that he just wasn't there. And that was a hard, scary thing to think about. So I try to talk to Liam frequently, and I'm like, I see you, I love you, I'm here, buddy, like, I've got you, like, and try to talk to him even though he doesn't talk back, because I'm not exactly sure to what extent he understands us. He's too young to get an intelligence test to see if he has any intellectual disabilities. We have to wait until he's older for that. I'm not really sure. So it's a hard thing to navigate, but someone with level 3 autism, is perfect the way that he is. We are just trying to give him the resources he needs to regulate himself, to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to be able to go to the bathroom and communicate and have some sort of life where he gets joy and connection and can do things like say, I'm thirsty, tell us when his stomach hurts, and go to the bathroom on his own. But he is perfect and beautiful just the way he is.
When I'm hearing you describe being a parent to an autistic child, I personally don't see it in a negative light, but also because, like I said, my mother is a single mother and my brother would be recognized as level 1, so very different. But my mom still, because of the lack of resources, the lack of acceptance, it made it more difficult. And my family was very lucky, financially we were solid, but it was still very expensive. And there was more stigma back then. There was far less understanding, there was far less acceptance. It's working with kids, and as you're saying, like, you cherish this person for who he is. You just want to be able to give him the best life possible, not put any limitations. And that is in a way withheld or restricted from you because you don't have the same resources to help build a life for them, because it's not the same life path of doing kindergarten and then going to elementary school and then middle school and high school and college and building a career. It's how do we create life paths that evolve with this child and give them the best life possible. That's, I think at the end of the day, that's really what parents, no matter who your child is, parents are trying to give their child the best life possible with the means that they have. And so by providing resources, it alleviates a lot of the stress that you and your family have. And I know this is something that you've talked about at length, that we do not have societal systems and models that are set up for the success of children who are on the spectrum.
Correct. There are some resources for what I would say, for level one for, career coaching and how to do like mock interviews. And there's actually a place nearby that we would always pass on this one road. And it was like autism career training, which I thought is great. But for people like my son, the future is very uncertain. And what happens to him after 18 is a scary place to be because we don't know. And I go back and forth. It's something I used to think about a lot. And I try not to do it much now because we try to take things very granularly and slowly, piece by piece, because otherwise it can be a lot. It can be very heavy and it can trigger depression. And because we don't know what the future holds and things can change so quickly, we're trying to give each stage the space that it deserves and just move through it slowly. But there isn't a lot for children after school age. The resources there and what happens to them is very uncertain.
So, what are some of the resources and modalities that you are able to access that you have found to be beneficial and have helped Liam as he's growing up?
For us, in our experience, the number one thing that has helped us and helped Liam has been ABA therapy. ABA therapy can be somewhat of a controversial topic for some people. I have to admit, I did not really know about ABA therapy, and I had this negative assumption about it because there are some voices, very loud voices out there that do not support ABA therapy, and they equate it to say gay conversion therapy, which I think is awful. Let's put that, like, make that very clear. I think when ABA was new a long, long time ago, that some places did it in the wrong way, where they were trying, at one point they were trying to change autistic people to not be autistic, and it wasn't a good thing and it was traumatic for them. But what I'll say now is that ABA has come a long way, and the place that you go to get ABA matters a lot. You can tell pretty quickly, at least if you have the tools to know what to look for, of what a good ABA place is, and they want to work for you. They want to work with you, and it's about the child, not just trying to get them in so they can bill insurance, but it's about what they need and working on their timeline. My sister, I had a tough conversation with my sister, and I was telling her my perception of what ABA therapy was. And she simply was like, that is crazy town. It is the most helpful resource that autistic individuals can have. And it got me thinking. So I started diving into all the details about ABA therapy and doing tons and tons of research. And it's a hard topic because for me, we were in this place where we had been doing speech therapy, OT, services with school, behavioral therapy, just all these different things. And we had gotten nowhere over years. Like, we had been doing this for a year, literal years, and there was zero progress. I was like, we need to try something else. We need to do something else. So I was pushed to this point of like, okay, my sister, who I trust very much with her opinions, who has a lot of experience here, is telling me that this is the best resource. So I decided to find a place, and I luckily found a place that a good friend actually worked at. So that worked out really well. So I knew that it was a really good place. And my experience with ABA therapy has been amazing. We finally found a place that had the answers, because I have been asking all of the people in our life that were around Liam, teachers and therapists, these questions that they couldn't answer. Now I suddenly found myself in a space where I could ask those questions and get them answered. I asked In our very first meeting, I asked them, will Liam ever speak? And they said yes. And they said that typically, if an autistic child is not going to speak, then they won't have said any words at all. And Liam had said, Mom, Dad, go. And he babbles a lot. And that information right there, like I have been asking everyone that, everyone for years. And then finally, I got an answer. And they, obviously they can't say 100%. And he said that, but he was like, it's a very good indication that he will speak. Throughout our ABA experience, we went from him not understanding the connection with communication with words, that meant something. It was almost like how Helen Keller, before she made the connection with words, it was like the brain had this disconnect. But when Helen Keller learned the connection that words had an association with something, her whole world exploded. And that's kind of what happened to Liam. It took a lot of diligence and time for that to happen. But once he did, now he has told me, I love you. He is repeating almost every word that we say. He has trouble with S's and he still has some trouble with some words. And he doesn't do like sentences, but he'll do very short phrases and he'll do words. If we say a word like car and we put our hand up here to our mouth, then he'll repeat us. He's not speaking unprompted, but ABA therapy got us from him not speaking at all to him saying, I love you. ABA therapy got us from him smearing poop on his bedroom walls to him sitting on a toilet and peeing. ABA therapy has made so much progress in just like 8 months. That has helped us grow so much. But there is the stigma around it that I think that people who don't, I've heard a lot of voices of people that are either parents to level 1 autistic children and they see ABA therapy as this torture. And I think it's hard for me because I'm in this situation where my child's in life and death situations. We don't have the luxury of sitting back and just like not trying everything. And that's at least my standpoint when I first started. But ABA therapy is not this horrible therapy. It is, they are very gentle with him. They have taught him so much and given him the ability to speak, sit down and do a puzzle and help make his world a lot brighter and available, and to start learning at school. And without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And it's not if, like the therapy, I've sat in on multiple sessions, and I have weekly check-ins with his, for hour-long sessions with his ABA director, and they go over what they're doing, some of the issues. They give us coaching too. That was the biggest piece, is they gave us parent coaching on things we could do at home and ways to help him and ways to associate certain things to help with his safety. And that information, that knowledge is something that I've been searching for years. And I'm very, very grateful to those people. I'm very grateful. And Liam got to be around other level 3 autistic children. And there was a little boy there that was completely non-speaking like Liam. And then when I was in a session, he was just talking. And I was like, oh my gosh, that could be Liam. That did a lot for my mama heart. That was really beautiful to see. So it was a space for us to finally feel accepted.
I remember you talking about when you first told me about ABA therapy, and I'm somebody who's not really familiar with it, but how you unpacked it for me and your experience with it. I recall something you said to me once, and it was, this is not for everybody. And it's learning about what modalities work for you. I mean, it's not to say that it's similar to, but it's kind of analogous to when you're overcoming trauma. Traumas are unique. You're talking about helping the brain, and there's far more research on trauma and therapy than there is on autism. But some people are not the best at expressing themselves through talk therapy. Some people actually express themselves through somatic therapy, where breath work or even things like yoga are more engaging for them because they just need to process what's in their body rather than intellectualizing or analyzing what they're saying, or it can be a combination of both. So it's really figuring out what modality works for you. That's why I recall you saying somebody who's level 1 or has, as you refer to it as, low needs doesn't necessarily need ABA, where it's the one of the things that I keep thinking of as you're describing, from your life with Liam to being an ABA, is as a parent, part of parenting is being able to communicate with your children and teaching them. And that is a really big part of having a non-speaking child. That Liam will one day have the possibility to speak in full sentences is so exciting, because then it also bridges this enormous gap between you two, where you get to understand what he's feeling and show up for him with greater depth. You're getting to build that relationship. Communication is such a key tool that I think it's another thing that we tend to take for granted sometimes, is the ability to really speak to somebody and say, I want to show up for you. I want to help you. What do you need? How can I be there for you? And so this ABA therapy has been extraordinarily helpful for him. And I've seen that personally. It's not something for everybody, but as you said, it's finding an ABA therapy organization that works with you, that communicates with you, and that is also helping you guys as parents and providing resources.
Absolutely. And I think that ABA therapy practices can be used for anyone. With level one, the things that they're working on, ABA isn't really necessary. But again, each kid is different, and I'm not an expert on level one in ABA therapy. But at least from my understanding, for level three, it really is crucial because it's about, for me, what I've seen is building those connections. Because with speech therapy, Liam wasn't able to learn. Like, and he had years and years of speech therapy, but he wasn't able to make that connection that these words meant something. But then with an ABA, they taught him that through very slow progress of, I mean, very diligent and every single day, I mean, like building those connections. And once he built that connection and saw, like, oh, if I say the word gummy, I'm going to get some gummy bears. This is awesome. Maybe I should listen to like grown-ups. Maybe there's like a connection there. Then once he made that association, then now he's able to go into something like speech therapy and start building those connections. But without ABA, that piece was so crucial to build that regulation too. They taught him how to sit down and do a puzzle, whereas before his attention span was, I mean, he was off. He could not sit for more than 30 seconds. And they've really built that in. And for an education setting, that's very crucial, is to have that piece. So taking that away, I think the hard part is that school, now he isn't getting ABA therapy. We're going to start pulling him twice a week to give him ABA therapy, but if I want to pull him for more, say 2 days a week, then there's all this legal stuff where to get him to be able to miss a full day, we're looking at truancy, and we have to do forms and get things signed to make sure that we're not getting these counted as absences. And it's just a whole other like set of problems that we have to work on. And that's very difficult. But overall, ABA has just been amazing. And I'm very, very thankful for everything that we've learned.
And as we were just talking about societal models that are not inclusive of children on the autistic spectrum, you've talked a lot about in length with me how ABA has now created this opportunity to start pivoting into the future. What does that direction look like? It goes back to not having that uncertainty to having some confirmation, validation, the understanding that your son will speak one day because he's showing signs that he can. It's how do we get there? And then you get to move on from the next steps. And so we are so used to having these systems set up where your child gets accepted into a school, they go to school, they do a sport, they do some sort of after school curriculum or activity or whatnot, but you are actively having to build that model for your child specifically and outsource those resources. So you are actively creating their entire life, where our society is set up for people to move at a certain pace, especially in the States where we're a very individualistic and hyper competitive society. You are
Yes.
trying to provide an environment and an atmosphere for your son where he can thrive in being the best version of himself.
Absolutely. That future is what is very scary and weighs heavily on my heart. Well, for one, kindergarten is just a different experience. You know, I had that with Nathan where he went to kindergarten, and it has been very different with Liam because they speak like all the kids are a certain way. They say things like, "Oh, your kid is going to learn to read and write this year, and we're so excited about, you know, all the friends they're going to make," and just there's just different things. Every email comes with a little twinge of pain because my kid isn't geared towards my child. The words that are saying it's pain every single time, where I'm reminded that my child does not fit into this environment. And I think that that's really hard. But the future is uncertain. He's definitely talking, not unprompted. We have to like get him to say the thing. Speech might not ever be his preferred method of speaking. So even if he has the ability to speak, he might not ever have that be his preference. We have a tablet, an AAC device, which is a device with icons, and you press them and then they say words. So sometimes it's called a talker. And that's another way to communicate. So we've been working a lot with him on that, and they work with him in school on that. And that might be his preferred method of communication. We're exploring what that looks like. And we don't really know. That'll be up to him, just like how every kid is different. But I really do hope that at least he'll have the ability to have those conversations, and I can hear what his thoughts are on literally anything. I'm like, do you like this pretzel? Is this like, does this taste good? Like, what, literally anything. I would love to hear his thoughts on anything. That would be a really amazing experience. And for him to just tell me when he's in pain and what he's feeling and thinking and what he needs, because I don't know what's going to happen as he gets older. That's something that's, it scares me because right now, like, we can pick him up, but as he gets bigger and older, the safety features, I'm scared that that will fail him and he'll get out of the house, because as he's learning and growing, he's getting smarter. I get really scared about each stage, what that next thing is going to, what next fear or security issue is going to be there. I also don't know what it's going to be like as he matures and what prom and graduation look like. All these experiences that parents will get to have that we won't have with him. That's scary. And then also what happens after 18, because where is he supposed to go? You know, I don't know what is going to happen, but from what I know about his level of autism is that most likely he will either live at home for the rest of his life, or he will have to go to a facility for other autistic individuals and build a life there. That decision is something that is very scary, and him having a life outside of 18 when he's out of the school system where there's all the support, and then all of a sudden then there's no support. How is he gonna find friends? Like, what is he gonna do with his time? What are we gonna do for care? Are we going to be having to take care of him for the rest of his life? The scariest thing for me is what happens when my husband and I pass away. That is probably the hardest question for me to think about. And he does have his siblings, and I know that gives me a lot of comfort for me, but then that's also a huge thing to put on our children. I'm terrified of him thinking that we abandoned him, because I don't know what he'll know at that point and if he'll understand what death means, and that I just don't want him to think we left him, and to think that he won't have us is very, very scary. It's something I try not to think of often, because when I first started exploring that thought, it was really heavy. It was really, really heavy, and definitely triggered depression for me. It's very scary. I want him to have a life. I want for him what I want for all my kids. I want them to have friends and explore their passion and feel connected to society and find joy and love. And I don't know that he'll ever have a girlfriend, ever fall in love, ever get married, hold a job. I don't know that those things will happen. I hope that they do. I don't know. That part is hard for me, because I want those things for him, and I'm not sure that that's in his future. And then I don't know what our future is. Like, you're supposed to, when your kids are 18, they go off into the world, and then you're not caregivers anymore, which is heartbreaking, but we're never going to have that. It's going to be us as caregivers for the rest of our lives. And that is also an extremely heavy thing to understand. And it wasn't like when he was diagnosed, someone sat me down and told me all of these things. These were small realizations that I've had over the last 3 or 4 years, which is another trauma. Again, and I know I keep using that word, but it is, because you have to
It is.
come to this realization on yourself, on your own. And then when you have that, you could be, you know, in the grocery store, and all of a sudden you realize it. It's like, over those years, things you didn't think were a thing, but then something triggers that thought, and then you realize that. It's really heavy, and it's hard to kind of stop yourself from going down the rabbit hole, which is why I said I like to move very slowly and step by step, because if I think too much into the future, it gets very overwhelming. Because I didn't think that he was ever going to talk. You know, I never thought that he would say I love you, but he has. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm just going to continue to advocate for him and push him to be the best version of himself, help him just be happy and supported and safe.
And this reminds me of what you were saying earlier. There's a grieving process where you realize that there is a certain loss. It's not a loss in the sense of losing out on this and I'm not going to have it. It's you're expressing how much you want your kid to experience these wonderful things. And as he grows up, you all get to understand what he will create and what his passions will be through time. But there is this understanding of, you know, you want your kid to have friends, you want him to be accepted. And the reality is there's still a lot of stigma around autism. The younger generation speaks to it more openly and with more fluidity and more acceptance, which is wonderful to see through the use of social media, especially,
Yeah.
and talking about neurodivergency in the spectrum, which gives you hope, especially since, you know, Liam is so young. So hopefully he's growing with that generation who speaks to it with care and compassion. But at the same time, you know, you're vocalizing just wanting to know how your son is feeling, to know if he likes the dinner you've made for him so that you can provide it for him again because you want to see that happy look on his face that it's like, oh, this is his favorite food. You're
Oh, don't
talking.
worry. If he doesn't like the food, he will throw it. He'll be like, "No,"
Oh,
and throw it. There's definitely a lot with nonverbals that he can communicate with us. And we've definitely gotten really good at interpreting. But that's surface level. That's basics. That's like if he doesn't like something or if he likes something, we can tell that. And that if he's overstimulated or calm, or if there's a TV show, he'll start laughing, like, and there's eye contact, and like when he makes eye contact with you, he's like staring into your soul, like you feel it. Like, it is the most beautiful thing when you get that eye contact, especially for like 10 seconds. Oh, that is like pure liquid joy. It's gold. But that's all interpretations and body language, all that. You get good at understanding it, but you don't hear the other things, like, oh, I really like this show and here's why. You don't hear the whys, the little nuances, the little details, things that I've come to love with talking to Nathan about it. And why does he love space so much? What does he find so interesting about that? What is he just seeing how his brain works? And it's hard to not have that connection with Liam. I'm his mom. I will always love him and he will always love me. That's just instant. But then you don't have that connection of the conversation and the back and forth. And that's something that I so desperately want with him, and that I want him to have with others. I want him to have that connection. People are the most important thing. And I want him, in whatever capacity he wants, to have that. I want him to help give him what he needs. But without understanding what he wants and what he needs, we can't exactly do that. And we're left to just make those decisions for him, which is tough.
you're basically describing that, when you're talking about building a community and a structure, a model around him for him to live a life that he enjoys, you're talking about 24/7 hands-on care. And
Yeah.
again, going back to, we live in such an individualistic society, you're really having to shape a community around him so that he is always safe and loved and accepted. But you have to actively build that together on top of being a mother to two other small children and being a stay-at-home mom and showing up for your family and showing up for your community. I know how involved you are in your community in Nashville. And because of the lack of resources that are available to you, and for everything that you've just spoken to, this is not only a lot of time and attention, energy, but this also has an emotional impact on you. As you've said throughout this conversation, these are, little traumas and big traumas that are accumulating over the years as you were raising your child and figuring out how to raise him and show up for him. But as much as you are being this parent and trying to understand how you can provide for him in the world that we live in with what you have available to you, this also takes a toll on you as a person. How has this, I mean, I've known you for decades. 21 years of friendship. I've seen how this has affected you and wanting to be this wonderful mother that you've always wanted to be a mother. How has this transformed you emotionally and personally?
That one, I'm still kind of processing that one. I think I'm still so deep in it that it's hard. I mean, I've come a long way in the last few years learning and growing, but it is a roller coaster and it's hard. I have kind of lost who I am as a person. I recently went to New York and I got to see you for, one evening, but I went on a trip with my sisters and my dad. And that trip was so needed because when I came back, I was so much lighter. I needed that reset. I needed that reminder of who I am outside of being a parent, and that I am still fun and can move through life in a non-anxious way. Where there's a problem, we have to pivot and go here, like normally in life, then that stresses me out, and then I'm researching things and I'm trying to find how to do something. But in New York, I was lighter. I was like, oh, that there's a problem, whatever, we'll figure it out, everything's great. And I was just so happy. And coming back, I was a completely different person. I was a better mom. Normally, like on a Monday, I would be like doing emails and trying to figure something out and be productive. But instead, I decided to take some time and hang out with my daughter and go for a walk, then go have lunch with my husband. And then in the afternoon, I got some stuff done that I needed to do, but I was able to balance my day in a better way. And then at night, I slept well. because my priorities were aligned with what I want. And I got that time to be happy and enjoy life. Whereas I feel like I've kind of pushed a lot of that away, and I've been focusing on getting the things done and making sure everyone's okay and planning the next thing and doing and going and not really enjoying life. That was a really good reminder and reset for me that I really needed. This year for me is about finding myself and reconnecting with who I am. So I'm excited for that journey because I have gotten a bit lost, and I think it's important when you're younger, before you get married and have kids, to take the time to get to know yourself and find who you are. Really explore that before you become everyone else's world. Everyone else is everything, because that is all encompassing, and everyone deserves to have that time for them. So I'm kind of working to do that now on top of everything else. So not sure how that's going to work, but I'm working on it. It's been hard. It's been hard, especially with having ADHD, trying to navigate that. I have to keep up with everything, and that's hard. I have to mask a lot and act like everything I have it all together, and then perfection comes into it. I have lots of documents, I need lots of planning, I need lots of, I have to write things down a lot or I'll forget it. I'm emotionally exhausted from trying to navigate everything with my children, and then also my own struggles that I have with being neurodivergent and fitting into a neurotypical world, and the judgment that I get if I'm doing certain things that are social stigmas, then I get that on me. That's hard. That's a hard emotionally and physically. It's a constant battle. And I am really working towards, and have been working towards, making sure I get time for myself to reset, because I won't be my best if I don't have that time to fill my cup back up. And I've noticed that I'm definitely a better mother when I do that. I think that's very important for all parents to do, is to have those resets, even if you feel like you don't deserve it. Like my husband, I'm trying to plan a trip for him because I know he won't do it. That's another thing I don't think I have brought up before, is what autism is like for fathers, because they have a lot of feelings too. They just aren't as vocal. And I know that my husband feels a lot of the same struggles as I do. And I think that there's not as many support systems in place for dads. And I think there should be more support for men and caregivers that are male, because girls, we like to talk. Clearly, we go and talk to each other and we decompress and we'll go to therapy, but guys tend not to do that. I hope that we as a society get better at allowing men to have that space to grieve too and feel all the things, because he feels exactly like I do. He's going through the same emotions that I am as well, and I think it's important to hold space for the dads too, because they are my husband, and the dads that stay, the dads that support, they are supermen. They are amazing guys.
We don't have a lot of resources for parents, and especially for men and the men who stayed. As I said, my mother is a single parent. But for the fathers who do show up, I've spoken to a lot of men who describe the things that they want to be able to do with their son. And there is, as you said, there's a grieving, but then there's also, understanding, okay, well, who who is my son growing up to be? And so giving fathers the space to learn how to also show up, because just from conversations with friends, it's there are things that you want to be able to do with your kids that you're really excited about, and so you
Yeah.
can plan for all of these things, where now it's, how do I meet my kid and show up for them? And men do lack those resources, because when you don't have a space to work through and navigate your feelings, then they begin to pile up. And a conversation that keeps coming up lately, just in my social life and with the podcast, is there's constant conversation about resetting your nervous system and what you can do and all these insights and pointers. But I had a conversation with somebody the other day who's going to be coming on as a guest, and he was talking about all of these little triggers that you don't realize are, your nervous system is still in a state of panic, where it's frazzled, or you can have this frenetic energy, which made me realize, I'm like, oh, my nervous system is definitely not healed. And
Same girl, same.
look at that, solidarity.
Yeah.
um I look at you, and as somebody who knows you to the depth that I've known you for all these years, and understanding the life that you live, all I can think of always is, your nervous system must be so fried. And when I'm tired, like, I got I was so burnt out this weekend that I just needed to sit in bed and binge watch Buffy and do nothing. That is such a luxury to me that I was able to say, I need to just move some things to make space for myself. And it's what you're talking about. It's having a reset for parents and not feeling guilty about it, because you really can't show up fully if you're in a state of shock.
Yeah. And how are we supposed to do that? Because that's the thing is I can't relax. Like I can't have that space. I mean, my husband does a great job of supporting me when I do need that and just need to lay in bed and watch a TV show and relax. Say it's the weekend, my son has a soccer game or we have a birthday party or we have to go shopping for, there's that next week is like, it could be homecoming week and we've got to have like it's pajama day and hat day and all these different days and it's always prepared. There's always something to do and get done. Getting that space to just be, we don't get a lot of time to relax, even outside of like takeaway vacations and events, things like that. But even just relaxing, like I don't even know what it's like to live in a quiet house. Like I haven't had quiet in forever. Finding those spaces are really hard, especially in our society that prioritizes being productive and grinding hard at work. And I don't agree with that in our society. I think it's being productive and making money is not everything. It's a
But
means to live, but it's not the most important thing in life.
I know from our previous conversations that you've had to put your career on the back burner, and it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind, because your family comes first. And so you're talking about this work-life balance, but as a stay-at-home mother, you are constantly showing up for your children, constantly being on high alert, having to be aware of the situation. And as you said, you're also fighting a stigma of, you want to be able to keep Liam safe, but to what extent? So that it's not overtly controlling, where he has the freedom to express himself, and where some people can look at the situation and associate it with bad parenting, when the reality is, you're working with these life and death situations. And so this work life balance that I'm, for instance, having to deal with, you're not dealing with, because you've given up your days to show up for everybody else. And like you said, you're where are you in this scenario?
Yeah, that one, when I let you know how I figured that one out, I will tell you. I think that's the hardest one to deal with for me, particularly when it comes to me and my emotions and dealing with all of this and where I am currently is that piece. I think I'm grieving that part of me. It was never the plan to not go back to work. It just kind of happened that way. I'm glad I have the ability to do that, but at the same time, I miss having something of my own. I miss having something I'm passionate about or love and my own identity. And I don't get that. And that's tough. And it's tough to not have those spaces to find myself. And I used to not be an anxious person. I was chill. I was talkative and high energy, but I was like, I don't know. The person I am now is very like, I'm planning a lot. I'm worrying about the next thing. I can be a little, I don't know, with my husband, I can be looking at all the negative things and focused on all these little details. And I forget to be present and to live and that, it's okay, chill, just like enjoy the moment. Like, and that's easy to say now, but when you're in it, it's a lot. And my body gets frequently dysregulated and I yell at my kids and I get frustrated and I'm focusing on negativity and all the things that can go wrong, not because I'm trying to be negative, but because I'm overwhelmed and there's so many things and my brain just goes on a loop and gets out of hand. And that's not the person that I want to be. I love my kids and I could not imagine a world without them. They are in the universe and without them, there's no universe I want to be in without them. And at the same time, I'm also really tired and I miss having that space for myself. I miss not having to worry about everyone else's needs. And I am exhausted. I am physically and mentally exhausted and desperately miss having time for myself and having time for my marriage. And that's a heavy one. And I don't know what the answer is. It's still working that out.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I'm sorry.
I forget that I am fun and positive and can just go with the flow and enjoy life. And I don't feel like that person anymore. I don't even sometimes like the person that I've turned into. That's hard. I don't want to be that way, but I'm so tired and I'm so overstimulated and exhausted that it's hard to not be that way. And that's hard because I don't want that to be the person that my kids see. I want them to remember me as happy and enjoying life. I want them to see their mom happy and enjoying life and not stressed. And I'm working on it. I'm working on it.
What would be helpful and beneficial to you as a mother in terms of providing resources, what schools could do, organizations could offer, even just things that could be implemented into the community? Because as you are putting in so much of this time and energy and space for your children, the resources are here for the kids, but it's also here for the parents because we're having a conversation with you as a parent and not with someone who is autistic. And that is another conversation for a separate episode. But what would be beneficial to you as a parent that would help you create space to regain that sense of agency and show up as the mother that you want to be?
I think that there's actually a lot of things. I think that's a positive thing, is that there is a lot of things that can be done to help in that space. And I think that gives me a lot of comfort knowing that there are solutions. And I hope that I can be a part of that as my kids get older and I have more time. I hope that I can really help be a support in my community to help make that happen. Some of the things for me would be events that included support for level 3 autistic kids. The YMCA has a program for autistic children for swim lessons, and it's free and it's fantastic. And we really enjoyed that. So, more of programs like that so that kids that are autistic or have Down syndrome or are blind, just more programs in general for kids to participate in society, an art class or more sports stuff so that they can feel included and participate in social activities. I think education training for teachers and for students. I mean, it doesn't have to be this long process. I mean, for kids to have someone come in and explain hey, this is what autism is, or if there's a student in a class that has a disability that, even if it's something like dyslexia, where there's just this part where you explain what that is, what that might look like. Because stimming is something Liam does a lot, and I'm sure at his age he will be made fun of. And I think it would go a long way to have someone come in and just explain why he does that and how it helps regulate him, because kids can grow. They have the capacity to really have just if you explain it to them, they get it. I've seen that firsthand when these younger kids that were 6 years old heard Liam stimming and were kind of oh, he's talking funny. And at first I was going to be that kid. I got real protective, but then my husband, it was really special. He just matter of fact said, "Oh yeah, Liam has autism and he gets dysregulated, and sometimes making noises with his mouth helps make him feel calm." And then we heard the boys talking about it. It was just oh yeah, that just helps make him feel calm. It was just a normal thing to do. And I think that piece of education when kids are younger, kids are so good and kind and sweet. And I think being able to teach them a few things like that early on really has a big impact as they grow up. And I think offering different structures in the school system that don't make it harder for parents, giving them the ability to take their kids out for ABA therapy, or having an ABA therapist, or just a different structure that works with that neurodivergent kid in a way that helps them more, I think would be beneficial. Education and advocacy for police and firemen training would be a huge thing. About 6 months ago, there was something that happened where a little boy was having an episode. I'm not exactly sure what was going on with him, but he was shot by police because he had a knife in his hand. But there was a fence in between him and the police. And the fact that that happened was absolutely horrible. That did not need to happen. And I think one of my biggest things that I want to do is to go around to all of our local police and firehouses and talk to them and just say, "Hey, this is my son, Liam. Here's some of the things that you could possibly encounter as he gets older. And basically, please don't shoot my child." And we live in a good area. I don't think that will happen, but I don't know. And that's a fear. So I think going around and talking to police and firemen could at least make me feel better, because I can then explain, this is what autism looks like. This is some of the behaviors he might do if he's not responding, because that scares me. What if he gets stopped by a police officer and he's not listening, and they tell him instructions and he ignores them, and he's like, they see that as a threat because they don't realize he's autistic. That is a fear that I have. And I cannot imagine what mothers are feeling for people that are minorities, for mothers of Black autistic children. That hurts my heart so much. I cannot imagine the fear that they must feel. That is something that definitely needs to change, is police and firemen training, not only mental health crises look like, but for what neurodivergence looks like and what they might encounter, so they don't make mistakes. I also think, and this is a simple one, is fences around parks. That would be awesome. We go to a playground and my son will just run off and I'll have to chase him. And having just a simple fence where he cannot, there's only one way in and out, would create so much less anxiety. I think that would be a huge, huge help.
And to add to individuals who are marginalized minorities, coupled with the stigma around autism, it just fuels the racism, because you were talking about systemic racism and society here in the States. So it only further fuels that racism and almost acts as a scapegoat, when the reality is when it comes to autistic children, autistic Black children, autistic minorities, we need to be equipping our police and community with understanding even more what is going on with these kids, why they're acting the way that they're acting, that it is their natural state, that this is nothing to fear or be reactive towards, because at the end of the day, it is about keeping our children and our community safe. And the marginalized community is not spoken to enough, especially with how little we speak to autism as a whole, although we're getting better at having a conversation, although that is something that I would love to speak to it in greater length with in a separate episode. But thank you for bringing it up. You and I have really had the opportunity to live with the privilege that we've had. What you're talking about essentially is cooperative community involvement,
Absolutely, yes.
because the way that we've evolved as a society has felt isolating, where everybody understands their respective part of the society but not necessarily how to work together as a whole,
Yeah.
or even understand that community or that area. It goes back to stigmas are formed through ignorance of the unknown, and if you can create an honest association of, oh, like you said, he's just stimming and this helps him because he feels overstimulated, like, and those children were able to receive that and say, okay, this is something that he just needs to do. It's not a threat, it's not weird.
That was really beautiful to see that in real time, to see that happen. It was really cool to see kids' capacity to take that information and go with it. It was really cool.
And it's not a large,
Yeah.
you don't have to study this, it's not a large amount of information that you have to understand. It's just recognizing the signs and saying that's what's happening, and then moving on with your day, because you know what, that's normal, that's natural, that's what they are doing to self-soothe. And we all have different tendencies and mechanisms of how we cope with things, because life is stressful and life is anxious, and it just looks a little bit different for someone who's on the spectrum. Also, one of the things that you and I speak to a lot, and that we've spoken to in this episode, is we grew up with financial privilege, which has allowed our families, the ability to provide the resources for your kid, for my brother, ensuring that they're able to go to the right schools. I know that you've talked to me about these care facilities are extremely expensive for, what happens after 18, or being able to live his life out in a community. But again, it's so hands-on that it requires an enormous amount of finances to keep it operational.
Yeah.
And so it immediately becomes inaccessible.
Absolutely. The average person cannot afford to do that. We haven't quite explored what support we will get after he turns 18, when he's an adult, like what financial support. But from our experience already, there's no way that that is going to cover a long-term care facility. That's something that we are already trying to save for and even look for, because lists, my husband told me the other day that some places it can take like 10 years to get into the facility. So that's something that we're having to look at now, which is not something I wanted to do, because that's a big one. I was always dead set on, my son is not going to live in a care facility. I couldn't imagine that. But it was actually something that Colin Farrell was talking about, and that he said, when he passes away, he wants his son to already have a community in place, because if he's dealing with the loss of his parents on top of then moving from his whole world into a new place, that is way too much for anyone to handle. So having it already where his son is living in a facility, has a community, has friends, has, art classes, and is has this whole world already there, then that will be a lot more manageable transition, and it's giving him something really special to do that beforehand. That's definitely something that we have thought about. It's something that, like, where I would want to make sure it was very close to us so that I could be visiting him on a regular and constant basis, probably once a day. But then that would allow us the opportunity to go take trips, just do a lot of things and not have to worry about the safety of him. And he would have more fun, honestly, when I think about it that way. He would have a better quality of life being around other autistic individuals and having classes and going on field trips and doing those kind of things than being at home with us, because we're not going to be able to give him the same kind of opportunities. That will be a whole journey. Once we get there, we will dive more into that. But that's kind of my overview of what that looks like. Another way to help is to ask me questions. People tend to not ask me questions. I've only had, I think, like one friend really ask me very good, thoughtful questions. And I know it's because people are afraid that it will be a trigger, or that I'll get emotional, or that it's like that you shouldn't ask those questions. And I totally get that, because I've been that person. Like 100%, I understand that. But actually, what people need is to be asked those questions, because how are you supposed to get to know that person? Like, if you have a friend with a child with autism, ask them, sit down and ask them. And it doesn't have to be this long, intense conversation. It can just be a few questions here and there, or go spend time with that child and get to see. That's really the best way to understand autism and what the family is going through, is go and spend time with them and see what it's like, and ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. I think the questions are important. I think those questions are what we need to lean into. Those topics that seem like taboo, it shouldn't be. It should be the opposite.
You're basically describing the one thing that every single person on this planet wants, to be valued. And
Yes,
that's really where our systems fail us, is when we don't have the resources or the communication and the authentic narratives, not even a narrative, just an authentic dialogue around what's happening. You don't feel valued, you don't feel seen, you don't feel that you are a part of society. And we are a social species. We want to be seen. You're asking for people to recognize you and to be aware of you and to want to understand you and say, I want to be inclusive of you. How can I do that? And that inclusion, as you said, it's very easy. Ask a question. It's not a long winded conversation. It's being aware of what's happening, understanding that all these things are not a threat to us, and that we can communicate with each other to find resolve and open up spaces of care for one another.
absolutely. And I think it's important to celebrate the things with Liam, like all of his wins, like when he because I don't want it to be this like negative thing. I feel like sometimes I get caught in the how hard it is, because it is really hard, and I want to feel seen, but then also to celebrate, like, there's a lot of good there too, and to focus on the good things too, and the wins and all the milestones that he's hitting, and how much he's growing, and how proud of him that I am. And I mean, seeing him make friends. I mean, he's social. He wants connection. Like, he loves going down the slide with his little buddy. He likes singing songs. Like, he loves those things. He wants the social connection. It's just different than what you see with neurotypical kids.
And I hope that one day Liam will be able to find his voice, figuratively and literally, so that he's able to express the things that he's going through. And maybe one day he can follow in your example and in your footsteps, and we get to have a conversation, because he's a very cool kid. I've got to watch him grow up, and that just goes to show that with that uncertainty, it's not an end. You might be finding your way in the dark, but you are moving forward and carving out that tunnel no matter what, because this is a priority too, because it matters, and Liam matters. So I look forward to celebrating his wins alongside with you.
I can't wait for that to happen.
Thank you so much for opening yourself up and sharing your experiences with your family and with Liam.
I am honored to do that. I am so happy that I have a space to talk about it and that you are asking these questions. And it's very healing for me to be able to do that.
Thank you again for being here and for all these years of friendship and welcoming myself into the opportunity to get to know your son and sharing the story. I look forward to the day that he and I get to have that conversation. For those of you listening in, I have a little meditation set aside following this episode, being able to show up in someone's shoes and understanding the importance of this conversation and why we're having it. So stay tuned for our next segment. Thank you to Callie Boyette for carving out that large chunk of time to talk to us. As a mother of three, a stay at home mother with a severely autistic child, and having to manage everyone's schedule, I'm really grateful that Callie was able to paint such an extensive portrait of what it means to be a parent with a severely autistic child, as well as a mother to two other young children. As I said, I've prepared a little bit of a meditation, if you want to call it that, where I would like to welcome you all into a new perspective. So, if you could please join me by closing your eyes. Every single one of us faces stresses in life, whether you're an individual living on your own, or if you're in a relationship, a marriage, if you have children or not. All of us have cumulative stresses that take a toll on us throughout the day. If you are a mother or father tending to the household, managing all of the tasks and errands that keep your house going and maintain the lives of your family, or if you are someone who has to perform in an office or even working from home and interact with colleagues and stressful deadlines, these things again accumulate. And at a certain point, you need to be able to decompress. I know when I come home after a long day, I like having the ability to tune out and turn off. Nobody can access me. I'm not responsible for anybody anymore. And I know for most people, the ability to shut down and reset for a new day is a major priority, especially for our well being. Our days can be mentally, physically, and emotionally taxing. And so it's important that we're able to disconnect from the world around us and make ourselves the priority. Now, I want you to put it in the perspective of a parent who's raising an autistic child. This is considered a luxury, not a priority. Your priority is making sure that every single thing in your household is put away accordingly. You have a routine, everything is organized, your child and their well being are safe, and so is your home. Because that box of cereal, that can be poured all over, made into a huge mess. The jug of milk that's left out, splashed on the carpet, on the couch, all over the kitchen. Not only is this a giant mess that you have to clean up in the morning that you're now starting your day off with, it's a new added financial cost. All these little things that we like to be able to put aside to get to later have to be attended to in the moment. To a parent of an autistic child, the extraordinary and high alerted sense of awareness that you have to maintain constantly takes a toll on you, and yet at the same time, you can never turn it off because you are consistently having to be aware of your child's well-being and your home's well-being. Parents of autistic children do not have an off switch. They are constantly on it. They are constantly aware and concerned about their child's safety. There is no decompressing. There is no reset. There is no me time. And these are the small little things within the safety of a parent's home, within the family home. Everything is about the child's well-being. That even means during the night. Is my child going to break out of the house? If they run into a neighbor, could somebody potentially harm them? If they run into the police, will the police recognize that my child is autistic and therefore not be reactive, not potentially cause physical harm or even potentially kill their child? These are very real realities for parents with autistic children that a lot of us do not face. And this is why this conversation was so important to Callie and I. As a mother to an autistic child and myself as a sibling to a brother who is on the spectrum, it was important for us to come together and share this conversation because so many voices are coming into this discussion of autism, what it is, who's to blame. And the reality is that there are very vulnerable children and parents who are just trying to raise them to the best of their abilities and give them the best life that they could potentially have. Children and parents of children with autism have so much to overcome already. They are navigating uncertainty in a world that is not inclusive of autistic children, especially children diagnosed with severe forms of autism on the spectrum. They have to be able to find the proper organization that will recognize, accept, and treat their child with respect. Not to mention the paperwork, insurance, government funding, paying out of your own financial pocket. There is so much that parents have to navigate. The last thing they need is the judgment or negative labels that are associated with raising an autistic child. To any parents of autistic children listening in, I have such an extraordinary amount of respect and consideration and awe of you, especially seeing my best friend raise her son with her two other young children, as well as seeing my own mother, a single mother, raise my brother and myself. I hope that this episode has in any way brought you a sense of comfort and relief, and knowing that you are seen and very deeply valued. To the people who are tuning in who have maybe not have had as great of an exposure to autism or understand what the spectrum fully entails, I hope that this podcast has granted you any sort of insight or perspective as to what it really means to raise a child with autism and how much parents really have to overcome. There are so many fingers pointing to parents for blame, and the reality is they don't need our judgment. They need our compassion and they need our respect. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to show up and help raise an autistic child. If you are someone who has resonated with this episode, whether you are a parent of an autistic child or you are at the beginning of your journey and the diagnosis with your child, or you're someone who's just curious about autism and wants to get more involved, please reach out, connect. You can send me a direct message at nomore.podcast on either Instagram or TikTok. I really would love to hear from you and be able to, in any way possible, connect you with any resources that I have, or connect you with Callie. I know that she is always looking to stay informed, be informed, and inform others, as well as building a network so that autistic children have a greater representation in our society. Please join us and continue the conversation by following and listening on all major podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, and iHeart, and you can subscribe and watch on YouTube. Thank you guys again so much. I will see y'all next episode.